Okay. If you do have any comments, then please feel free to put them into the chat room. This is the Belonging series. This is the Belonging series run by Imperial as one, and it's a series of candid interviews with BAME individuals. It's not necessarily about the science that they do or the lives which they lead, but it's about how they get their sense of who they are. And so we'd like to investigate that with them. And this week, it's my pleasure to welcome Sonia Kumar, who is the Director of Undergraduate Primary Care Education for the School of Public Health. And I know we're going to have a really good discussion this week. So I'm going to hand over to Sonia, and she's going to just explain a little bit about what she does. And then we're going to discuss how she gets her sense of belonging.
Thank you, Wayne. I've been at Imperial nearly 8 years. I'm the Director of Undergraduate Primary Care, which really oversees all the undergraduate placements that our medical students do in the community. And so that's from years 1 to 6. We're really keen that our students have an understanding of generalist medicine and community needs. And really building off of that, we established MEDIC about a year ago, which is a medical education and innovation centre. And really the purpose of MEDIC is really pushing boundaries with innovation and research in medical education that has an impact on society. And I think that really does speak to what we're going to be talking about today, because it's all about making a difference, particularly for voices that don't get heard.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Being the Director of Primary Care, you're going to have to be interacting with a wide range of people, plus the students, plus academics. How does that make you feel in your position?
I mean, I think this probably gets to the core of what we're talking about who you are as a person, and whether you try and flex who you are according to who you're talking to. So whether it's the top person, or I'm not even going to use the hierarchy, whoever you're talking to, I think it's just having a strong sense of self. And that makes it quite easy, because as everyone who works with me knows, Sonia comes to work and the same Sonia is at home, and the same Sonia is, and of course during the pandemic that Sonia is all mashed up at the moment, because work, home, children, family, it really is all mixed up together. Yeah. But I think if you can just be the same person of who you are, irrespective of who you speak to, it's easy. And I think I've always been like that. If I go back to my medical training, thinking about how I spoke with my consultants, I mean, I think it used to take them aback really of how I used to speak to them, but I didn't used to speak to them any differently that I would speak to my other junior doctor colleagues. They were human and I was a human.
So where did you get that self-confidence from? Because most people, it's kind of like when they get into a situation where there's someone who they think is much more senior, it's kind of like... So
no, I don't feel like that. No, I don't. I've never felt like that. I think it's probably my dad. I think it's probably my dad, because I think when we were growing up, we were very aware that we were different. It was the 70s, it was the 80s. You didn't have a sense of belonging because you were constantly being told that you didn't belong. Right. And that was either subtly, actually it wasn't that subtle, it was hurling of names. And those of us, and anyone on the call who was around during those days, you'll remember it really painfully, you know, going shopping with your mum and dad, but actually having to leave really quickly because you were being chased down the high street by a group of skinheads, or, you know, horrible stuff. And it's sometimes best not to dwell on the stuff, but actually how that influenced you. And I think it did influence me in that actually probably your sense of belonging comes from self, opposed to trying to find a sense of belonging. Yeah. And I think my dad was always very much, you can do anything, you just have to believe in yourself, you really can do anything. Yeah. And I think probably because he said that when I was a child, I really believed it, I didn't question it. So it's sort of become part of my makeup. I really do believe that I can do anything, which is probably completely delusional, isn't it? I think if you've been brainwashed in that way from a child, then you do believe it. You take it as read. That's, of course, you can do anything if you want to do it.
Yeah.
There's nothing that can hold you back.
Yeah.
Which, of course, isn't the reality, but anyway.
I think I need to meet your dad, because that's a really good way to instill confidence and resilience, I think is the word. And based on what you were experiencing outside, where people were calling names and etc., to build up that resilience to still believe, despite all that's going on, I can actually be anything that I want to be, right? But translating that to being where you are, how did that come about then? Because I think you've achieved an awful lot, right? And how do you think that mindset of yours has enabled you to be in the position that you are now?
God, these are big questions, aren't they? I think probably the one thing that really has probably influenced things is opportunity. And I said this, I think I had a picture taken recently, you had to write a quote. And it is a quote that I honestly do believe in, that people say opportunity doesn't come knocking on your door twice.
Mm-hmm.
Don't wait for opportunity to knock on your door,
mm-hmm.
because in our current climate, sometimes opportunities will knock on your door, but we know that those opportunities aren't distributed equally. So you have to go and make your opportunities. You have to go and talk to people, and some of the jobs I've got didn't exist. The centre that we've established didn't exist. Medic didn't exist. No one came to us and said, you've got a really amazing skill set in your team. Do you want to establish an education centre? No, we thought that was a good idea and we went and did it, and then obviously negotiated with who we need to set it up. And it's the same for about 2 other jobs that I've got. Obviously not this job, but 2 other jobs that I've got in my life. I've literally just gone and made an appointment with someone and said, this is who I think you need. And sometimes the job wasn't even advertised. I convinced a professor once to create a job because I reckon there was a need. And it worked. They did. They created the job.
You sound to me to be very persuasive when it comes to to getting things done. So to me, you seem to be someone who is a go-getter. You see the opportunity, you go for the opportunity, you make it happen where it's possible to happen. So that to me also says someone who has great vision as to where they want to be going forward. What would you say, because the medic idea which you've just said, how did that vision come about? And how was that from an inner sense? What was it that drove that passion to establish these things?
I think it's probably 2 things. I think it's an inner drive. I think from quite an early stage, I didn't even really know, again, like many other people, I'm 2nd generation Indian. We knew we were going to be educated. That was never a thing. You were always going to go to university. That was, there was a line, and I was thinking, as I was sort of thinking about this interview, there's a line that my mum actually used to say to me when we were younger. They can take the clothes from your back, they can take your things, but they can never take away your education. Because obviously they had been uprooted a few too many times in their lives. And so education, I think, is powerful. That I think is, if you were to come up with a list of strategies, I think getting an education yourself, but giving that gift to your kids, I think that is the ultimate gift, actually. So I think there is an inner vision of making a difference, but I think it's also surrounding yourself with people who share your vision and have their own vision, but that it's all aligned. And so I've been so fortunate to be in primary care, because the people I work with, we really get each other. I almost want to say on a spiritual level, but that sounds a little, over the top maybe, but it really is. We really do get each other. And the vision is what carries us through, because we all do genuinely believe it is our responsibility to make a difference. And in our roles, if we don't make a difference, it doesn't matter what happens in our PRDPs or what exams or awards we get. The key outcome, I guess, that we will be judged against, if whoever you believe will be doing the judging,
Yeah.
is, did you make a difference? What legacy
Yeah.
did you leave?
Yeah.
And I think it's, yes, it's twofold. It's that inner vision, but it's surrounding yourself with people who share that vision. And then really anything's possible.
I like that. I do like both of those statements. The fact that the power of the education, right? And we'll go into that later on, but also having a vision which you can share with others. And that then, a couple of weeks ago, Sunday, Papa Ola, I always give him a shout out because I love the quote which he gave me. He said that if you want to go fast, do it by yourself. But if you want to go far, do it together.
Mm.
And based on what you've just said about that vision, right? You may have the vision, but in order to get the things done, you have to have surrounded yourself with people who share that vision. Yeah. I'm not going to ask, normally I would ask you a question here about being your authentic self, but I don't think the Sonia who's at work is any different to the Sonia that's at home. And we've already spoken about that inner strength that your father's given to you. So where do we go? What struggles do you think that you've had to overcome in order, even though I hear what you've said about the fact that you have often just gone in and said, this is what I'd like. But I'm sure you've just told us the success stories, right?
Yeah.
Where has that gone?
What's the dirty past?
Yeah, I'm not trying to be all serialistic or anything like that, but it couldn't have all been plain sailing.
No, it hasn't. And I think even if I go back to, it's never been plain sailing, as I said, even if I go back to early memories, 4, 6, 10, none of it was plain sailing. It's what you do with those struggles, I guess. It's whether you absorb them and they become part of you in a negative way, or you absorb them and they drive you. And in some ways they act as fuel, because you realize with every struggle you have, it's more and more evidence that things need to change, that things are unequal, that you do need to make a difference. So you don't welcome the struggles, because that sounds a bit sort of, as though you're welcoming struggle and pain. But you almost, when you see them, you're like, yeah, I know what this is. And this is, and it totally makes me realize why I need to do what I need to do. So it's sort of, it fires you. But I think the challenge there is that the fire doesn't consume you, because there have been times where, and I think for all of us in the last few weeks with Black Lives Matters, that you feel so emotional about what has happened. And you're aware that the emotion is about what has happened, but because what it's triggered in your own past, it brings up stuff, doesn't it? It brings up stuff. And it's what you do with that stuff. And I think for me, it's having a reflective awareness of what's happening. Even this morning, I wrote an email about something around equality and race, and how people hadn't seen what I had seen in this email trail. And you have to be very careful, because I was aware, I could tell I was getting emotional about it.
Yeah.
And it's just, I suppose, a word of caution, because the emotion's powerful, it gives you passion, and you can't ignore emotion.
Yeah.
But if you're too emotional, people don't listen.
Yeah.
And they start saying that you're emotional, and it's not, you're not listened to in the right way.
Yeah.
So it's walking a tightrope, I think, of using the emotion to fuel you and what you do and the people around you, but don't let it consume you, because then that becomes negative, and people don't listen.
People don't listen. There was so much brilliance in there. One of the things which, especially in this current climate with the Black Lives Matter, there is a lot of emotion which is going on. And I think you touched on some really good points there, in that, how do you channel that emotion so it's not detrimental, but it is beneficial? So I'm gonna throw that back at you, right, and say, how have I've told you it's a candid interview, right? Right? How have you channeled those emotions? What strategies have you employed to ensure that you can keep people on side without allowing that emotion to become so absorbed that it destroys relationships? Because that's what can also happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the key things is calling it out.
Mm-hmm.
Because you kick yourself. If you've been in a meeting, you've been at a dinner party, you've heard something said and you don't say anything because you've been a passive bystander.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of us who have experienced discrimination, you just don't forgive yourself, and then that's negative emotion. So I've learned, with respect and dignity, you call it out. When you see stuff, you call it out, because then that dissipates the emotion. Otherwise, you leave a meeting or a situation carrying the angst. So I think all of us need to call it out. And I don't think that's just who are the target of the discrimination. I think that's everyone. If you see it happening to someone else, it's that whole active bystander training stuff. But I think it's everyone's responsibility. I can see someone said, time to call it out. Absolutely. But I think the other thing for the person that's written that is you need to call it out in yourself. You need to have a very clear sense of what is going on in yourself. Because if it really is dragging, if the reason that you are fired up is really because of deep-seated emotion, because it's triggering something, something's going on there, there's some emotional connection with what someone's saying, and actually it's not really to do with what's being discussed or whatever document you're reviewing, it's because of something happened with your dad or something that happened with your sister. You've got to be able to call it out in yourself that, look, that's important, but it's not to do with this. And if you bring that to this, it's going to cloud everything. It'll cloud your judgment. And again, people stop listening. I think the other thing is having allies. That's a huge strategy. And I'm not talking about allies who are the same as you, look the same as you, same background. Because from my experience, and that's why the whole BAME thing, it's complicated, isn't it? Because we're not a homogeneous group. Even amongst Asians, we're not homogeneous. Even, so I'm North Indian in heritage. Even amongst that group, you could take two people who've got parents from the same background as me, and we look at each other and we think, I don't get you. So, people might think I'm too Indian or not Indian enough. And so it's not necessarily about trying to fit in with a tribe. I think it's about finding your tribe, and that's a multicolored tribe, different shapes, sizes, colors. And if you surround people like that, when you have those difficult emotional moments, talk to people and be really open about what has happened. But don't talk to everyone, because you can't trust everyone.
That's
unfortunately. And you don't know where the leaks are going to happen. So you can't have your tribe too big. It's got to be small. And if you do have people that you trust, as I said, and you don't limit yourself to where those people have come from, there's just a connection with those people, that they get you and you get them. I think it allows that emotion, because you will carry emotion, but you need to get rid of it. Otherwise you carry it with you.
I like that notion or the expansion which you gave on the idea of us not being a homogeneous set of people, and we all have our different characteristics. And the quote which I've heard often said, "You're my color, but not my kind." Right? We may look the same, but we've got different outlooks, and so there may be quite diverse viewpoints. Okay, so thinking about that idea of diversity, how can we pull different thoughts and patterns together and make it more focused in a way which can be beneficial? Because I think that's one of the things which people are struggling with now, is because they're looking at differences and they're trying to work out how different viewpoints can actually work together to make something which works for everyone. Does that make sense?
It does, but I'm not sure what's the question, Wayne?
So the question is, what strategies, because one of the things which you said was that when you're working in a group, sometimes people won't look like you, etc., and etc., etc., but you're still able to work together. So what is it that binds or helps you to come together, even though you've got diverse backgrounds? What would you say is the essence of that?
I think it's probably something we spoke about before. It's common vision,
Mm-hmm.
common vision, purpose, and probably the word we haven't mentioned is values.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think if you have common values, then you can get a lot done together.
Mm-hmm.
Respect for difference, respect for challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are people who work with me. I welcome challenge. I want to be challenged.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, how will we ever learn?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want people to agree with me.
Mm-hmm.
Because then what's the point of even having conversations if everyone agrees with you?
Yeah.
Why are they doing that? Is it because they don't have a voice, or is it because they're scared?
Mm-hmm.
Either of those things aren't good. So I think it's all of those things, but I think probably that the thing that would probably trump the list would be values. I think if you can have people around you with shared values, then the diverse backgrounds can work together towards a common goal. And I think the other thing there, of course, which is the elephant in the room, is having the right people at the table.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't have equality and diversity committees, and we're seeing those in every institution, that don't have representation from the right groups, because you're not going to come up with good decisions. You can't come up with good decisions.
Yeah. I'm just taking my notes, and I'm just looking. Every time you've spoken, there's just it's just scribble. I love the diversity, the respect
love to
for
look at those scribbles. Hopefully they're not little caricatures and diagrams. What is she saying?
No, not at all. Right. The three parts from that session, that little section or that question, was the need for shared values, and in addition to the shared values, being able to respect differences. And I don't know which one I'd class as more important, but I think this one I thought was really telling, the respect for challenge, because a lot of people don't like being challenged, and it automatically gets their backs up, and then there's a whole confrontation. So you're saying you welcome challenge.
I want it. Yeah.
You want. So how in your challenge, how does that manifest itself? Because there's different ways that you can challenge, and some will be classed as respectful, some will be disrespectful, and it's also the hierarchy. How do you overcome that level of challenge which people may want to, well, you're welcoming, but I'm just trying, how do you overcome the challenge?
It's hard, isn't it? Because you can surround yourself with a tribe who've all signed up to this, and through role modeling, you have demonstrated, I'm not challenging you, I'm challenging what you've said. It's a different thing. The difficulty comes when you're outside of your tribe and you're talking to people who maybe have been used to surrounding themselves with people who agree with them, or have a subculture that doesn't welcome challenge. And then the risk is, and it has happened, that challenge makes you an outsider. Because you might feel a bit of an outsider anyway, because of things that we've described. And the way in which you're putting yourself forward is seen as an outsider. And sometimes you're labeled in a stereotype. Angry, loud Asian woman, angry, loud Black woman. It happens. You don't want that to happen. So I think it's a hard one. And again, it's a tightrope, isn't it? Of how, if you are going to challenge, and if we say about calling it out, I think the only thing I can really say is that what you need to do is use evidence to call it out, to be objective. Don't get too emotional, and do it with respect. So if someone has been disrespectful, you don't meet fire with fire. You do it with respect. So you rise above them. Not necessarily, actually do any better, but you challenge with respect and you do call it out. But I guess it's just taking on the shoulder that you are going to get that challenge back at you, and you sometimes won't be heard because you'll be boxed. and you'll be, you know, the challenge, because it's too difficult to hear what you're saying, and your box does, oh, that's Sonia again, or that's because of the demographics you carry. Oh, that's them again. Oh, it's because of that, because the challenge is too difficult to hear.
Yeah.
But doesn't mean you stop doing it.
Yeah. No, I can see that. So I'm just wary of time, and time seems to have gone really quickly, and I do want to open it up for audience questions as well. So guys, if you've got questions, please put them into the chat, and then we can review them in a minute. I already know you're a visionary, right? So what's your vision for the next, say, 3 to 4 years in your current role, but as you see things developing as a result of the recent protests? What would be your visions? How would you navigate the ship through this?
I think it's, so in my current role, I think it's about really just carrying on what we're doing and thinking about how we can, through education, raise the voices of society and community, and use our students as the vehicle for that. And the indirect thing, I suppose, is then our students learn about why voices need to be raised. But I think it's about, if I can be the best role model I can possibly be, maybe you start to leave a legacy in people who clock that, and in the next generation starting to think, wait a minute, she's got to where she's got to, and she still calls it out. I think I might be able to do the same. Because if enough people, as I said, and it's irrespective of who you are, if enough people start pushing for change, then we'll get to somewhere better, I think.
Yeah. So it's a collective movement, and maintaining that collective movement. I'm going to open it up for questions from the floor. So if you've got a question and you'd like, then if you want to speak it out, I can see one from Zainab. So if Zainab, if you'd like to ask your question, if you don't mind, otherwise I can ask it for you.
Hi, hello, yeah. It's really wonderful talk.
Could you just speak a bit louder, please?
Yes.
Thanks.
Hi. So I just wanted to ask, in that case, when you don't get heard or are boxed in, like that's just you're just being loud, or your usual self, can you say a bit about how you respond to that, or how you let it go and move on from it, especially when you've got to continue communicating with this person on a regular basis? Thank you.
Thank you, Zainab. It's hard, isn't it? Because if it's one-off meets, it's easy. If it's an ongoing relationship, it becomes harder. I think where I find it it work is where you try and meet with that person one-to-one, and you try and explain that it wasn't about being loud or about being pushy. This is what you were trying to communicate. And trying to develop that relationship through understanding, because at the end of the day, Zena, we're all humans, aren't we? And I think it's about trying to connect with that person on a human level, beyond the words, to try and connect. You won't always connect with everyone, but there's something that usually connects you, and it's trying to find that connection. And if it's in a big meeting, it's hard to find that connection. So perhaps it's about meeting that person outside of that, and it could be by email. Probably it's going to be virtually at the moment, or in person. But it's about trying to find sort of shared ground, so you can work from that shared ground, so you can be heard. Because if you don't have anything shared, you'll continually it's constantly misfiring, and it's so frustrating to not be heard. I don't know if that's answered your question.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Zainab. I think I've got another question from Liz. If Liz would like to ask her question, otherwise I'll ask it for you.
Hi. Hi, Sonia. I'm really sorry, but I missed the first few minutes, so you may have addressed it. But your description of she's being a loud Black or Asian woman, I was very struck. You never get men described in the same way. So how much do you think this is a gender issue as well?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's the sort of, there's a lot of theory around intersectionality. And I think if you're a woman and you're a woman of colour, possibly you've got twice as many things to navigate. Difficult to know, Liz, what trumps what there. I think if you were to ask me, I'd probably say colour, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I think colour trumps everything. Unfortunately, I wish I didn't have to say that, but I think that's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a very
Thank
good
you.
point. It's interesting you mentioned about the intersectionality. Thank you, Liz, for that question. The intersectionality between gender, ethnicity, race, education, all of those things which make up who you are things which people could use and do use against you. They don't understand because they're not educated. They don't understand because they're black or Asian. So it's how we overcome those things which are all part of our identity, and come to terms with the fact that it's all part of our identity and move forward with that. Right, I'm going to ask Connie. I believe Connie's got a question that she'd like to ask.
Hello, thank you. So my question is, you're talking about building Medic. How did you find bringing others on with your vision? Especially sometimes, in the college, it can feel like it takes a while before, movements or things will start from the ground up before it's recognized, actually, maybe there's something here that we should really be doing more of, even when there was challenge. Thank you.
So I think probably humbly I would say there's two ways, isn't there? There's either having your vision and people going along with your vision, or it's finding people who have a vision themselves and then your collective visions move together. And I think it's probably the latter that works best, because I'm a visionary, but I work with many, many visionaries. We just happen to all have the same vision. So I think it's about trying to surround yourself with people who have a similar vision to yours, and that's because they have an amazing vision. Of course, they're not going to be totally aligned. There will be differences, but those core common values are the same. It's having allies, but I think, honestly, Connie, I think it's persistence. Medic took probably, I would say, months, if not maybe a years to establish itself. And you can only do that, I think, if the core group of people honestly believe we've got a good product here, there's something good, you really believe in it. It's a bit like, I suppose, do you remember the person who created the Tangle teaser? They went on Dragon's Den and they were told that it wasn't good, but they didn't stop, and it was a good product because they honestly believed that their product, there was something in it. And if instinct tells you, no, I know that a first hurdle, someone said that you're not good enough for a particular role or a promotion or a thing. I mean, it's widespread, but you inside, you think, no, actually, I do think there's something here. You just keep doing it, keep going for it, because eventually someone will listen.
And follow-up question, if I may, how do you find those people who you have the common vision? Is it just networking and speaking to people, or is there more that people can be doing?
It's instinct, I think.
Okay.
It's instinct. You meet people and you almost see the human behind the person, and you clock them and you think, we're on the same page. We've all done it. We've all been there. You meet someone, you think there's just something about you that actually, the way you're talking, the way you're handling yourself, the way you're responding to me, I like you. And it's picking up those people on your journey, and then picking up you. You're all picking each other up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's two very good questions, Connie. I like you brought up another couple of P's there: persistence and perseverance in the explanation. That you don't lose sight of the vision, and even it leads again to that idea of the resilience. That despite any knockbacks, the determination, because you know it's a good product, you persevere, you persist with it. And the follow-up question by Connie about finding people. I think I'm going to challenge you a bit on this instinct, though. I'm going to challenge you. You said you like being challenged, so here I am. I'm challenging you on this instinct, because you may think, what then happens if someone appears at the start? Because when you start something and it's all fresh and new, and everything's all shiny, but then what happens a little bit down the line where visions might start to stray? Have you ever been in that kind of situation where you've started off, both of you have a similar vision, and then part way down, visions start to kind of like separate? Have you ever encountered anything like that, and what have you done if you have?
Yeah, no, that's happened. You got it wrong. You know, you don't beat yourself up on it.
Mm-hmm.
You've met someone and you've thought, yeah, I think there's something here. Obviously, it's not, you know, love at first sight. I'm not talking about, you know, it's through a series of conversations and meetings, and you've got to know someone, and you've got it wrong. And actually, they either weren't on the same page, or they moved off, and you
Mm-hmm.
suddenly realise that, my goodness, we really do think and believe about things very differently.
Yeah.
That's going to happen, isn't it? Because
Mm-hmm.
if you are, you know, human, you are going to get it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to say the hit rate's better than more than not. But I think the other thing is, when you do get it wrong, don't beat yourself up about it, because often you might have connected, but then, like with any relationship, things happen, don't they, that
Mm-hmm.
alter your journey and alter
Mm-hmm.
the way in which you see things.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't always predict,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, that the allies that you have surrounded yourself with, that will
Mm-hmm.
always be your allies. I mean, if only that were to be true, that forevermore you are always going to be together and always on the same page.
Yeah.
You'd like it to be true, but you've got to be realistic.
Yeah.
That will happen, that you will deviate, and there will be differences.
Yeah.
There'll be differences you can contain and you can all manage together because they're respectful challenge differences.
Yeah.
And then there's differences that are, you know, insurmountable differences where your values are clashing. And then it is, you know, then it's about a separation of ways, I guess.
Yeah. As long as, I suppose what I would say is on those situations is the way the separation takes place.
Yes.
So that hopefully in 2 years' time, you would still be able to walk past and at least smile at each other, you know, as opposed to having any inner emotions which would sour the relationship in any way.
Well, I think it's about universal principles, I guess, isn't it? Because if you do genuinely believe in having respect and being dignified in whatever you do, even if someone isn't on the same page as you, doesn't mean their values are bad or wrong. It just means that they're not the same as yours. And so you can't suddenly, you know, switch your values and start being disrespectful to them, because then who are you then? Yeah.
Very good. Very, very good. I'm going to say, are there any other questions? Otherwise, I can continue with my question stream. Is there anyone else? If you want to put your hand up, or... Okay. So I'm going to ask a question, right, which is more related to... Right. What I'm going to ask is the following. What advice would you give to your younger self in helping them to navigate to where you are now? What would be the 1 or 2 bits of advice that you would give them?
I think it's be patient.
Just be patient. Just be patient. Oh, she's waiting for us to be patient. Just be patient. All right.
No, I've got, no, there is something after that. Be patient. You know, change takes time.
Right.
So and I suppose being patient, if you're not patient or you're impatient, there's a risk you start getting frustrated and cynical. You don't see things moving. And I think it's being realistic with change. Sometimes change might take a really small form. So, you know, as Zainab was asking about particular relationships, it might be something really small happens in that relationship. but maybe that's good enough for the moment because it's moved direction and it's going to a better place. So don't expect, I think the younger self sort of, you know, wanted things to happen now and they wanted things to happen fast, and there's just so much work to be done. The world needs changing and we haven't got time. But actually we have got time, just about. There are some things that need changing quickly, of course.
Yeah.
But the rest of it, you know, just take your time because you're more likely to come to a better outcome, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So patience, be patient, because change takes time. It's not a quick fix. Many of these things. So my final question then, in terms of like what's going on at the moment with the Black Lives Matter, the protests and everything, what advice would you give to the young protesters that are out there on the street? I suspect it will be similar to what you've said, but is there anything that you would say to them to keep them on track, to keep them going in the right direction? A motivational speech, what would it be? I've just thrown it. Go on.
So I think it is similar to what we've said. I think if what we are challenging through the protests is about respect and respect for diversity and about respect for being a human, then you have to embody that respect in the way you want to be heard.
Right.
So shouting about stuff, and I know we're angry, God are we angry, but shouting about stuff, you're not going to get heard, and in some ways you're contradicting the very values that you are striving for and you are protesting for. So you've got to role model what you're asking for, which is, can we be heard and can we be listened to, and I want to be respected. You've got to then conduct yourself in a respectful way, and not be disrespectful to others, because then you won't be heard and you're just, you know, it's a complete paradox of what you're asking.
So it's the way in which, from this interview, there's a lot of things which I've taken from it. It's about valuing and respecting individuals, modeling the behaviors which you would like to see in yourself and in others. It's about developing that perspective of, or not perspective, developing resilience and persistence and perseverance, because oftentimes these things are you're going to receive challenges, and how you address those challenges will have a lasting legacy, either for yourself or for whoever it is that you're encountering. And don't be afraid to call it out. Don't be afraid if whatever position you are in, if you're respectful, if you apply those values and you call them out, you know that within yourself you can be satisfied that you've done everything that you could have done to affect real change.
Can I just...
Go ahead.
I would just say, don't be afraid, and it's your responsibility to call it out.
Right. Don't be afraid. It's your responsibility to call it out. Brilliant. Brilliant. Sonia, it's been fantastic talking with you. All right, absolutely fantastic. I don't see any other final questions from anyone, so I'm going to just say thank you again for coming on to Belonging, and I know we're going to have many more conversations about a lot of the things that we've discussed and a lot of the things that we want to do together. So once again, I want to just say a big thank you. All right.
Thank you for everyone, you know, who's joined and listened. Hopefully there's been some insights, and hopefully together, you know, we can start to make a difference, because it's time. Yeah,
definitely. Just before everyone starts to log off, there's a few things which I'd just like to share with you based on what's happening next week. So let's just see. Let me just share my screen. So this week we had Sonia. Next week we will be having Dr. Moonlee Fong Whitaker, and she is currently a learning and development coordinator, but previously she's worked on projects related to the BAME attainment gap at the University of Reading. She's worked at a number of universities, and so she's going to bring some of her insight into those situations. And just before we go, we also have a couple of events, and this kind of like leads to the fact that next week, Monday, the 22nd of June, is Windrush Day. So Imperial as One have got a couple of events. There's the Windrush Betrayal, where we'll be having a conversation with Judy Griffith and Amelia Gentleman, who wrote the book, The Windrush Betrayal. And they will be having a frank and open discussion at 12:30 on Monday. And one of the things which Sonia really highlighted was the power of education. And this is not a prompt. I didn't ask her to say any of
wow.
all right. And so when she said it, it was just kind of like, wow, we're on the same page. So on Monday afternoon from 4 to 6, we're going to have the power of education, where we're going to be looking at Black excellence at Imperial, and both at undergraduate and postgraduate level. So take a picture of the URL, and we will see you next week. Thanks very much for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Let me just stop the recording.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you very much.